All right, welcome to Halitics. I'm Hal Ginsberg. It's Wednesday, so happy to talk to you. And I mentioned before, I always feel kind of good on Wednesday. It's like I'm getting through the weekend. We're getting closer to the weekend. Looking forward to some basketball Saturday and Monday men's NCAA championship. We'll discuss that with Arlen. Also, I've been following the women a little bit more than usual. I know there's this talk about the Caitlin Clark effect, but I do find the women's games exciting, enjoyable. It's not, for me, the same because the physicality, the athleticism is obviously not at the same level, but the shooting is really tremendous, and they do play a very, very nice team ball. So I have enjoyed the women's game more than I ever did. I don't know that I'll become a regular women's basketball fan, but yeah, it's something else. It's something new. It's something different. So I always welcome something different. Today's program, really not as different maybe as some of you would like. I do, because the topics are kind of the same, right? And I do think the wars, the destruction, the carnage around the globe is so important. We just can't stop focusing on it. These are moral questions for our times, no less than the Nazi Holocaust, the fascism that we saw spanning the globe in the 1940s was the moral question of that decade, no less than the racism, slavery, Jim Crow, lynching, and so on were moral questions of, immeasurable importance in previous centuries and are with us today, or the climate holocaust. So now are the wars that are just ripping apart lands such as Ukraine, the genocide ongoing in Gaza. They just cannot be avoided if we're going to talk about what matters and who we should be voting for, who we should be considering when the election comes. Both the primaries, maybe it's already happened in your state, and we already know who the candidates are in any event, at least of the major parties, and probably the smaller parties as well. So the question I asked today, is Trump the peace candidate? And obviously that's an important question. I'm certainly not going to endorse Donald Trump under any circumstances, but nor will I endorse Joe Biden. One of the big issues, one of the questions that are often pushed with an obvious answer, with a predetermined answer, comes from our corporatized media. And generally, at least the so-called liberal media's answer, the question has been, can you even think about voting for anyone but Joe Biden because of the innate evil of Donald Trump, right? I mean, that's sort of what we hear, the message that we get over and over. If you read the New York Times, if you read the Wall Street, well, not the Wall Street Journal, but you read the Washington Post, it was Washington, not Wall Street. Read the Washington Post, read the New York Times, read pretty much any big city newspaper, watch CNN, watch MSNBC. The message invariably is Donald Trump is an existential threat to everything we hold dear, everything we care about in this country. So you can't even consider, you can't even talk about anyone to vote for but Joe Biden. That's the message. So my question is Trump now the peace candidate? Because if he's the one who's more likely to bring about peace, then how can we possibly paint Joe Biden as clearly better? How can we possibly say that Trump is the Hitler of our times, the worst president ever, which is what we've heard over, from many people, even reputable so-called sources in newspapers. I've seen articles, Trump is the worst ever. We debated that on this program with somebody I think is very reputable. I did with Arlen, who argued, I hope he's pulled back a little bit from that position, but he took the position Oh no, Trump is the worst ever. Well, if he's the peace candidate, then you kind of see a lot of steam coming out of the argument that under no, you have to vote against Trump, right? That's the sort of the argument. You have to vote against Trump. Well, if he's a peace candidate, then that makes Biden the war candidate, right? And we're not for war. So I asked the question. And I was going to lead. I'm looking at my little slide deck that I always put together before the program with the eclipse path, right? The totality of the eclipse that's coming up this Monday is right through the United States. It's right through the heart, starting in the southwest at the West Texas, Mexico border, and cutting a swath across the center of our country through to the eastern Maine, Canada line. I was going to show you that, but maybe I'll wait till tomorrow or Friday or even Monday when the eclipse happens. I'm disappointed. I guess we can see a little bit of it here in Maryland. I'm disappointed I'm not in the path of the totality. Maybe I'll go up to Erie. That would be about as close as I can find, or Cleveland or something, but that'd be a long drive. Oh, by the way, I'm looking at myself. If you look your screen, the bottom right above the Halitics logo, you can see that mask I got when I was visiting Mayan ruins at Chichen Itza outside Merida. About an hour or so, I guess. Let me do my direction finder. About due east, about an hour plus east of Merida, and on the road to Cancun. So they have these masks, and I don't know if this thing is, how authentic it is, but it was pretty cool looking, and I was accosted, as we were, by many, many salespeople, folks. That's how they make a living, right? I mean, it's poor, as I said, and you just see so many people selling wares everywhere, and right there at the architecture, the world. One of the seven wonders of the world, I think they call it the new seven wonders, although it's not new. They have, probably maybe 100 or so people selling wares everywhere you look along that in that area. But I was taken by this mask that you can see there. I thought it was made of wood. It turns out it's some kind of plaster, I guess. But it's pretty cool looking. I don't know how well you can see it. Maybe I'll zoom in on it later. So kind of a little souvenir from my trip to Yucatan. Let's get to it. The New York Times suggesting, which is kind of interesting, because obviously the New York Times is, without question, completely against Trump. But this article, and this is one of the reasons, by the way, why I still, subscribe to the New York Times. I mean, you get an awful lot of information that you may have trouble finding anywhere else. Oh, and before we get to that, just let me remind you, yes, please, if you possibly can, I beg you, I implore you, use whatever word you want. Please, if you haven't yet, do like, and even more importantly, subscribe. Want to get those. There it is, the subscribe button, and it actually worked pretty well. So I got a comment from Kristen about how to spice up, jazz up the program. And my response to you, Kristen, is thank you. A. B. Call in if you're watching live. Don't just comment. I would love to talk to you and or anyone else who is hearing me, watching me as I am speaking, and has a thought. 240-242-5646. The question of the day is Trump the peace candidate? Trump's call for Israel to finish up war alarms some on the right. Well, when you read a headline like that, at least when I do, I immediately had mixed feelings, because finishing up, that's kind of very ambiguous. Does he mean end it, stop it, go home right now? Or does that mean finish the job, keep killing, but kill faster? Completely lay waste to all of Gaza right away. Is that what he's, I will play the video, but I can't quite conclude from that headline anyway that we should be excited about the potential for peace if Trump somehow is elected. Now, Trump has a little bit of peace cred. You got to give him credit for it. He did pull us out of Afghanistan. He started. Now, Biden finished it, but Trump started the process, so good for Trump. Biden, to his credit, had never been all in on Afghanistan. In fact, he told Obama, don't go to Afghanistan, don't pivot to Afghanistan. We don't want another front. So I give Biden some credit for that. Trump, though, was the one who started the process, the peace process, to get us out of Afghanistan. So he gets credit for that, and he has also spoken, and correctly so, very, very negatively about our involvement, our proxy war with Russia in Ukraine. So if that is the case, and if Trump now really is saying, hey, I'm backing away from Israel, I've always been a full-throated supporter of Israel, always taking the side that we need to do more for Israel, not less, and Israel has every right to, defend itself, which means killing as many Palestinians as it feels like without any challenge whatsoever from the United States. That's always been Trump's view. If he's pulling back from that view, then maybe he is more of a peace candidate than Biden. Calling for Israel to finish up war doesn't sound like peace to me, but alarming those on the right, we can't feel bad about that. I was talking to somebody about why, who was arguing with me about how good it is that Mike Johnson, the Republican speaker, is going to push for more money to go to Ukraine, $61 billion. I was like, what are you? It's been a disaster war. It's terrible. You got to show Putin. We can't give in to Putin, right? That's the argument that we hear over and over. We got to, stand up to people, not what's best. So if the argument is, if this is going to alarm those people on the right, those who are just like, we can never back down, and I don't care how many Ukrainians we have to die to show Putin, they're going to die. Hamas is responsible for everything that's happened since October 7. If what Trump is saying is alarming those people, that's good. That's a positive. That's something we should be happy about. That's something we should say, well, maybe Trump isn't as bad as we think. Let's go to the horse's mouth rather than the filter, the New York Times' filter. I think what really matters is to play Trump's words and see whether we get some clarity that we haven't yet had. So let's see if we can get that video here. Putting it together as I speak. And here we are. Here he is. I'll make it a little smoother, but you can see the interview there. This is with the Israeli right-wing or conservative media outlet. And so that's why I think the New York Times is saying he alarmed some on the right wing, because these two men who are interviewing Trump, I don't think were real thrilled with what they heard from the former president. Let's hear from him ourselves and see if this will work. I'll start and then we'll get the video up.
Since October 7, we saw a major rise of anti-Semitic attacks in America. What are you going to do about it?
Well, that's because you fought back. And when you fought back, and I think Israel made a very big mistake.
All right, so I'm going to stop it right there. When Trump first said, well, that's because you fought back, my immediate reaction was, that's a terrible thing for Trump to say. He's, and Trump says a lot of really bad things, and that's really bad. It's like he's saying, oh yeah, the people are mad at Israel. There's anti-Semitism because Israel did what everyone gets to do, which is defend itself. And I've heard this, by the way, from Billy Sunshine, if you're watching, people don't like Jews who fight back. People don't like tough Jews. I've heard that argument a lot. And it sounded, and by the way, that, that's that's not maybe it's true, but that's not the reality here. The reality here is that Israel's response has been genocidal. And I thought Trump was completely ignoring that. Trump was going with, well, hey, you guys were attacked. You guys suffered a horrible terrorist. You were victims of a terrorist attack. And now when you do what you should be doing, which is protecting yourselves, people don't like it. I thought that's where he was going, but he pivots. He pivots to something that's a lot more tolerable. So let's hear it.
mistake, and I see it, and I saw it every night, and I wanted to call them and say, don't do it. It would say the Israeli Defense Ministry, or a tag would be on these photos and shots, I mean, moving shots of bombs being dropped into buildings in Gaza. And I said, ooh, that's a terrible portrait. It's a very bad picture for the world. The world.
All right, so even here, Trump correctly identifies what Israel is doing to Gaza, has been doing and continues to do, bombing buildings, residences. And he's identifying that correctly as the reason. Remember, the question is, why is there a rise in anti-Semitism? Now, I've argued, and I think persuasively, powerfully, although I don't know that anyone's been persuaded, which is greatly to my disappointment, that really there hasn't been a rise in anti-Semitism, or at least if there has been, it hasn't been documented. The examples that are provided over and over, and by the way, they're thin, they're generally anecdotal, they're reports without any specificity of rises in anti-Semitism. I presented images from a synagogue near my house, which was not an anti-Semitic vandal. It was simply, there was some spray X's, not swastikas, on a sign that said, "We stand with Israel." So that's not anti-Semitism. It just isn't. You can call it that. That's what people will say it is. It isn't. So I don't buy the claim by, that's the assumption in the question that there's been a rise in anti-Semitism. But Trump turns it around and says, hey, yeah, if people are mad at Jews, it's because they're seeing every day, every night, the Israeli Defense Forces dropping bombs on residences. And he says it's a terrible look. Now, you can see it's a very bad picture for the world. Now, I have a problem with calling it a very bad picture with the world, because to me, it's not the problem isn't it's a very bad picture for the world. The problem is that people are being killed, that Israel is massacring people. That's the problem. But okay, at least Trump is saying, well, the fact that Israel is massacring people is why people are mad at Jews.
The world is seeing this.
Yeah, but Hamas terrorists are in those buildings, so how can we fight them?
You go.
Right, so of course we have to fight Hamas. So too bad if, there's collateral damage and 30,000 plus Palestinians are killed, maybe half of them children. So it's too bad, right? That's the question. That's how it's being presented. And then here's Trump with his response. Well, do what you have to do.
Do what you have to do, but you don't do that.
So that's actually kind of a good thing for him to say. I mean, it's hard for me to spin that against Trump, the way he said that. I'm good with that answer. Although I'm not good with you do what you got to do. But I am good with you don't do that. All right, more from the video here.
And I think that's one of the reasons that there's been a lot of kickback. If people didn't see that, they didn't have to see that. Every single night I'd watch, and every single one of those. And I think Israel wanted to show that it's, tough. But sometimes you shouldn't be doing that.
All right, so let me stop it there. So it's kind of unclear. Is he saying the problem is people saw what Israel is doing and that we should have kept it off the news? You should have done it in secret? When the Nazis were slaughtering Jews, when the Nazis were committing genocide against Jews and also killing gypsies in great numbers and other minority groups, other, Untermenschen or wherever the hell those sick bastards called people that they wanted to destroy and rub out, these sadists. They didn't do it in plain sight a lot of times. Yes, people saw the Jews in cars, in cattle cars being shipped away, but generally it was kind of done out of view, out of sight. And I know that during the Vietnam War, a big concern of some of the military was, well, everyone's seeing what we're doing in Vietnam. We've got to stop it so people don't see it. So I'm curious, is that what Trump's bemoaning? Is he concerned that it's being seen, or is he bemoaning that it's actually happening? Again, it's ambiguous. So I'm not going to give Trump all that much credit. I'll give him a little bit for at least identifying the rise in response, in response to this question, the rise in anti-Semitism as a direct response to what people are seeing that Israel is doing. But is he saying that Israel shouldn't be doing it? Or is he saying we shouldn't be seeing it? That's where I'm somewhat unclear. And you can only give Trump very, very grudging credit because he's not prepared to say, no, what the real problem is that Israel is murderous. It's a murderous country. All right, more from the interview.
Senator Chuck Schumer just a few weeks ago called the Israelis to go again to the polls and change their government. And on top of that, we see, I would say, daily interference by the administration. Yeah. Tell us to do that, tell us not to do that. What do you think about what Schumer said about the Biden administration support or maybe not support so much to Israel?
I think it's a terrible thing to do because it takes all of your momentum away because they watch government, they watch the people, what's going on, and it shows great division in the United States. You have to have...
All right, so I'm going to stop it there. Bad answer. Obviously, Netanyahu has to go. And Trump has said that in the past. He said after the attack on October 7, it was Netanyahu's fault. But here he's telling, he's not going to ever. He's in full campaign mode, and he's always going to attack the Democrats whenever he can. So he'll never give any credit. And he sucks. I mean, he's really bad. And I'm not going to pretend he isn't or ignore the negative aspects. But that said, we also have to be honest and say when Trump gets it right, which he does to a significant degree, where he blames Israel for the rise in anti-Semitism, and he says, you don't do that. You don't drop bombs on buildings. Yes, Trump is correct on that issue. I don't know if I'm going to say he's better than Biden. Biden's terrible too. But it is sort of semi-refreshing where Trump is not just simply saying, oh no, Israel's got to defend itself and it's all Hamas's fault. I appreciate that. Let me put it that way. All right, let's get to the more of this interview where, again, Trump says some pretty good things, or not terrible anyway. So here we go. Video on bottom. Here we go. And ambiguous, right? None of this is clear cut. This is not Jill Stein. This is not Cornel West, Dr. West calling for peace. But on the other hand, Joe Biden ain't calling for peace either. So, I mean, they're two really bad candidates. Let's not give Trump credit where it's not due, but let's acknowledge that his opponent could be arguably even worse. And we'll hear more. And actually, Cenk Uygur has some interesting thoughts that kind of mirrored my own. I thought I'd share them with you. But I want to play the rest of this here. So here's Trump. Here we go.
All right. That being said, you have to finish up your war. You have to finish it up. You got to get it done. And I'm sure you'll do that. And we got to get to peace. You can't have this going on. And I will say Israel has to be very careful because you're losing a lot of the world. You're losing a lot of support. But you have to finish up. You have to get the job done. And you have to get on to peace. You have to get on to...
All right, so again, ambiguity, nothing clear. But you have to get to peace is good. You have to finish up the war. I don't know what that means. Does that mean just wipe Hamas and by extension Palestine off the map completely? That's clearly the worry. A lot of the media, let's get to what the interviewer. So one of the guys who interviewed him was named Kahana, and he wrote an article. He is really concerned. I wish it were true what he was writing. I mean, I really wish we could, with some degree of confidence, conclude Trump really is for peace and against what Israel's doing, it's hard to get there. But what Kahana didn't like was when Trump said, you have to get to peace. You have to get to peace. And he writes in his article, even more than what Biden has said, where Biden calls for a 6-week ceasefire in exchange for releasing the hostages. Trump didn't even mention the hostages. Now, he might have forgotten them. I don't know that. I wouldn't take a lot out of that, but it's true. It's true because the argument, well, Hamas has to release the hostages is just a green light for Israel to keep killing. So Israel should stop killing. The hostages, you negotiate for them. First you stop killing, then you negotiate for the hostages. But Trump didn't even mention that. So I guess that's a positive for Trump. Not the Israelis don't see it. And then what Kahana says is Trump bypassed Biden from the left when he said we have to stop this war and get back to being the country you once were. There's no way to beautify, minimize, or cover up that problematic message. Trump was you can interpret what Trump was saying in the worst possible way, not the way Khan is saying, hey, he's really going after us. He's really criticizing us. He's telling us to stop what we're doing. There's no way to sugarcoat that. Well, I wish it were true, but it really isn't. Trump's saying the world doesn't like it. People see people getting killed. It's hard to defend. Doesn't mean I don't defend it, but it's hard to justify, to be honest with you. So just stop it. Trump's right, but let's not overdo it. And I think his aide, and then we're going to get to what Cenk Uygur saw in it. And I've criticized Cenk in the past, but here he really spoke what I think. So I wanted to just share that as well. I think what Trump's spokesperson said is pretty fair. Israel's interests would be best served. This is what Trump was saying, says Caroline Levitt. Israel's interests would be best served by completing this mission quickly, decisively, and humanely. And he did, the humanely, I'm like, well, did Trump really go there? Well, he did say, don't drop those bombs on those buildings. And he did say, move quickly. So I think that's a fair synopsis. And we're not hearing that, to be fair, from Joe Biden. Let's get to Cenk, the sweaty young Turk, not so young anymore, although I think he's younger than I am, I'm sorry to say. And we'll play some from him because I think it's instructive. I only like to play other hosts when I feel like it's instructive. Here I think it's instructive.
Look, there's a lot there, and I wanted everybody to see the range of it because this could be disastrous for Palestinians and it could be pretty good for Palestinians. It really is very variable. You know exactly what you're going to get from Joe Biden. You don't quite know what you're going to get from Donald Trump, and this was a pretty good example of it. So with Biden, you could lock it in right now. He will huff and puff about Netanyahu and Israel, and they're going too far. And the furthest he'll go is an abstention in the UN. That's it. He's never going to cut their funding. He's going to rush money over to them no matter what they do. It doesn't matter if their government is left wing, right wing, whatever it might be. So Biden is what he is, okay, and it's not great. It's a lot.
I would stop. I wouldn't even say it's not great. Let me get that there. That's not good. That was where it was ended. It's not just that it's not great. It's horrible. It's terrible. Where Biden is awful. For Cenk to say, well, he's going to rush money over no matter what Israel does, and it's not great. No, that's awful. That's genocidal. That's pathological. And is it because he wants to get reelected? Probably. I think if the polls were, if Biden felt that he could take the side of the Palestinians without losing critical financial support and without facing AIPAC's wrath, he would probably pull back from his support for Israel. But we don't know that. All we know is what he's doing, and what he's doing is really, really bad. It's awful. It's not great. It's just awful. So a little more from Cenk. I had to sort of slice and dice that interview a little bit. But I think his kind of summing up, he says, we know what we're going to get from Biden. It's not great. Now, we know what we're going to get from Biden. It's awful. Here's what he has to say about what we might get from Trump.
Look, there's a lot there. And I wanted everybody to see the range of it because this could be disastrous for Palestinians and it could be pretty good for Palestinians. It really is very variable. You know exactly what you're going to get from Joe Biden. You don't quite know what you're going to get from Donald Trump, and this was a pretty good example of it. So with Biden, you could lock it in right now.
So we heard that before, but let me get to where he's talking about Trump, see if we can get that in there as well.
Okay, I mean, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard. Chuck Schumer and Bernie Sanders are the two most senior Jewish American politicians ever, literally,
so now
in
he's
American
criticizing,
history.
But
so no, they don't hate Israel. I think Bernie actually, when he was younger, lived in Israel for a little while. No, they love Israel. They want to support Israel. And that's why they're speaking out against this particular government of Israel, because they think it's heading Israel and America in the wrong direction. The idea that AOC or Schumer or Sanders hates Jewish people or Israel is absurd, totally and utterly absurd. And the AOC and the squad has the same motivations as Bernie Sanders does, which is protect innocent lives, both on the Israeli side and on the Palestinian side. But Jordan, the real question here is, what does Trump mean by finish it up? Just finish it up. And
this is the part I really wanted to get
to.
And I apologize for a little bit of an issue there, playing a little extra, but that's what I was asked as well. What does he mean by finish it up?
Let's get to peace. Sounds pretty good. Let's finish it up does not sound good. He says, bombing them from the air looks terrible. Don't do that. But hurry up and kill whoever you need to kill to wipe out Hamas, which would probably mean killing tens of thousands of more civilians through the bombing and fighting alone, let alone the 1.1 million people that are in imminent famine situation. Some have already begun to starve to death. So with Trump, what we might get is a nightmare much worse than Biden.
All right, so I'm going to stop that right there. Uyghur is ultimately a guy who wants the approval of the establishment. He gets a lot of money, I think from David Geffen, I believe it was, who helped fund him. Maybe it was Katzenberg, I don't know, one of those guys from SKG, wasn't Spielberg. So he is got a foot in the establishment. And he can't just simply say Trump isn't worse than Biden. I don't know that Trump isn't worse than Biden, but what he just said there doesn't really pass muster with me. And let me repeat it for you.
Bombing and fighting alone, let alone the 1.1 million people that are in imminent.
Right. So 1.1 million people now at risk of starvation in Gaza, and probably it's really 2.5 million. And the killing never ends. We saw aid workers killed who work for Jose Andres, for example, who were on a humanitarian mission. So the killing by Israel is just their lust for killing Palestinians appears to be unquenchable. And more
famine situation. Some have already begun to starve to death. So with Trump, what we might get is a nightmare much worse than Biden.
All right, so this is what I didn't understand. How could it be much worse than Biden, right? He says, what we get with Trump could be a nightmare even worse. And I'm trying to understand that. Because what Uyghur said earlier was, you know what you're going to get with Biden. He might huff and puff, he might complain about a few things Israel's doing, but he's always going to support them in the end. Maybe there'll be an abstention on a meaningless vote in the UN. So how could Trump be worse than that? That's what I don't understand. I don't see that. How could you be worse?
But we might also get a guy who says to Israel, yeah, clean up, go home. You're not getting it. I want this thing over because it's a pain in my ass. And so you're either going to stop it or I'm not going to send you any more money. Now, that is very unlikely. But with Trump being so variable, it's at least on the board, which I don't think it's on the board for Biden.
All right, so I'll stop it there. I mean, I think that's the correct answer, right? Not that Trump could be worse than Biden, but Trump might possibly, very unlikely, but possibly could be a lot better, or at least somewhat better. You couldn't be worse than Biden, really. You could only be worse if you sent the U.S. military to help Israel. Because otherwise, there's no, we look, even when Biden wrings his hands and says it doesn't look good what Israel's doing, it makes us look weak and feckless. We're continuing to support their genocidal actions. So I don't think you can be worse than Biden on this. And maybe, probably not, Trump would be a little bit less bad. So, yeah, I mean, does that make him the peace candidate? I'm going to say no. But there's a chance he's less of a war candidate, at least. And certainly when it comes to Ukraine, but also possibly when it comes to Israel-Palestine. Things not going well. I want to bring up Ukraine because we're talking about endless war. So things going badly. You can see that in Ukraine. It's a disaster. It's unfolding. We are very much responsible for what's happening in Ukraine. And just so you know, the latest news, they're lowering the military mobilization age from 27 to 25. Now, I had known that you wouldn't be drafted if you were until you were at least in your mid-20s in Ukraine. But I didn't realize it was that high. In the United States it's 18, right? The draft was when you were 18. So I don't know why they have an older age in Ukraine. I don't know that that's good, bad. I don't want anyone killing people. I don't want people going to the military. I do believe in a draft. I think if there's going to be a war, if a nation decides it has to go to war for whatever reason, chooses to go to war, then everyone in the country should be set to release, except for people who are physically incapable, or they're too old, or they're too young. Everyone should be subject to that. That's my belief. It's one of the many awful things about what Israel does is those Hasids, the ultra-Orthodox, they don't have to serve. They're very much responsible for much of the violence by Israel and against Israel, and yet they don't even have to serve in the military, which is outrageous. It's wrong. If you're going to have a war, if you're going to have an army, if you're going to have a military, then I think everyone needs to be subject to some type of military service or some other type of government service. We don't do that in this country. I think it's wrong. I don't know, the age of 27 or 25 seems a little bit old to me because, by that time, many people are having children. They may be married. They may have started families. I don't want them, young parents leaving their children behind. Not that it's okay if an 18-year-old has to leave their family. It's not. But I see the real harm, though, from children who lose one or both. I mean, what could be worse? They're made orphans because their parents are killed. The age is going to be brought down from 27 to 25. Zelensky says he needs 500,000 more soldiers. 500,000 more. I don't know how many they've had, but my guess is at least 500,000 already. So over 1 million. This is a country of 36 million people. I had the number, of course. I didn't put it. Yeah, here it is. Let me show it to you. I thought I had it, and I do. I'm glad I did something right today. The population a year ago, slightly a year.
Less there will be of Ukraine. It's very simple, actually. If this goes on longer, Russia will capture more territory. If it goes on long enough, Russia will capture Odessa, Kiev. If we continue the way we're doing, and this is a Biden project that goes back 10 years now, will completely destroy Ukraine.
So I mean. And you can see it, right? I mean, you don't just have to rely on this Columbia professor, right? I mean, we see the battle lines have crept westward. Very slowly, but they have crept westward. We just saw that Ukraine needs to lower the age of conscription because it just simply doesn't have the manpower. So, I mean, the evidence is overwhelming. And the only argument I hear is, well, we've got to show Putin. Well, this isn't hurting Putin. It's hurting Ukraine. It's leading to death, destruction. And what we should be doing, and the end of Ukraine, what we need to do is push Ukraine to stop killing. You know, I often feel like, well, what's the point of doing this? Nobody, you know, it's not even that people don't agree with me. I mean, you don't have to agree with me. The problem is it's just I'm not persuading people, and I don't know what else to do. This isn't even close. These issues aren't even close. We should be helping Gaza repel Israel, and yet we're helping Israel destroy, eradicate Gaza and Palestine. We should be doing our utmost to stop the killing in Ukraine, and yet we're continuing, we're perpetuating it, we're promoting it. Even on the left, so this is Climate Hawks, I don't give to them, but I get their emails and such, and they're, you know, they get what the climate holocaust is doing to our planet. And yet look what these lefties are saying. They want more aid for Ukraine, urgently needed aid to Ukraine. This war is so bad for the environment. It's so destructive. The U.S. military is one of the biggest causes. I remember Habanero Herb used to point this out, even though he became a denier. He would point out the U.S. military is one of the biggest sources of fossil fuel emissions. Absolutely correct. Military war destroys the environment. And yet these climate hawks want more aid, more military aid. They want another 500,000 conscripts fed, cannon fodder into the maw of war. And their only complaint is that Mike Johnson, and it's a valid complaint, is saying, well, if you want more weaponry to go to Ukraine, you want to keep this war going, then you have to agree to lift the ban on exports of liquefied natural gas. So basically what you have, the Republicans and the Democrats outdoing each other on who could be more evil. The climate holocaust, ecocide, all of us at risk. Our children will be living, if not them, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, they're going to be sifting through the ashes of a dirty, gray planet to survive. And the Democrats and Republicans are outdoing themselves to see who can be worse. Biden, Schumer, Hakeem Jeffries, Jamie Raskin, bashing the right for holding up weapons of death from going to Ukraine, and now Mike Johnson saying, well, if you want to keep killing you, if you want more Ukrainians to die, then you got to agree to export LNG. You got to vote for Green. You got to vote for Jill Stein. These people are just, they're evil. They're on both sides. There's just no defense. There's no friggin' defense for this. Yeah, I got a few more minutes left. I've been so disheartened by the response of progressive groups in Maryland to this Democratic plan to have online casino gambling. It's an awful idea. It will raise money on the backs of people who have a mental health condition called gamaholism. It is incredibly regressive. It destroys families. And this is being promoted by Democrats. And a group that I used to work with, in fact, I used to work for, I was a staffer, Our Revolution Maryland, and Our Revolution is simply unwilling to take on these malefactors, these thugs, I don't know, whatever you want to call them, the gambling interests. They're simply unwilling to do it. And I don't know if it's because the Democrats are behind the bill. The Democrats have been corrupted by the casino industry. I assume that's a big reason for this. I assume that's a big argument, but a big reason why our revolution will not take on the casino industry. But it's it's absolutely inexcusable. It's just wrong. And just as you see those climate hawks saying we need, it's quite extraordinary. We need to keep giving, keep the killing going, right? We need to have the killing continue in Ukraine. The only question is, can we at least not have more liquefied natural? Let me read to you this. I was going to try to find that email from the guy from Maryland who, what really just so disheartened me, but I just finished a book. It's called Hotel Berlin 43. And the author, it's very interesting. I think she wrote it in English. She was Austrian. She left, she escaped the Holocaust, Jewish woman. Vicky Baum wrote a lot of movies, books that became movies, including a book called Grand Hotel, which was a huge hit in the early 1930s about a hotel in Berlin. And then she kind of followed up before the Nazis came to power. And then she followed up with this book, Hotel Berlin 43. I think Grand Hotel was written in German. I think Hotel 43 may have been written in English. If not, it's an interesting translation, which is sort of an Americanized English. For example, she uses the word, or whoever translated, I think she wrote it, use the word soccer to describe a game that the English would certainly call football, and I would assume the Germans do too. She uses, or whoever translated, used the word soccer. So it seems to me it's an Americanized translation. Probably, therefore, it is actually the author who wrote it in American vernacular because she was an Americanized citizen by then. She's writing about what life is like in Germany at this luxurious hotel in the middle of the war. And I read this. She wrote it, I think, right around during the war, actually. It's called Hotel Berlin 43. I think that's when she wrote it. And she certainly captures, it certainly feels extremely realistic. And to me, it feels like, in many ways, what we are now dying through. And so, here's what she says. It was 20 minutes to 10. I cut it off a little bit. The Jardis band was playing in the banquet room. Champagne bottles pop. So these are your elites. These are your privileged. These are your today Silicon Valley billionaires, your masters of the universe. The Central European Trade Commission toasted the new order, the glorious future, and the ties of friendship linking their countries to the Third Reich. The people in the hotel, this crude, flashy new aristocracy, were well-fed, well-dressed, well-behaved. But outside there was a town, and I would just read, if you want it to be today, a world full of desperate, tired, exhausted people. And that's where we are now. That's what the world has come to. I'll get to, fortunately, I do have more of that. Let me get to it. So a town full of desperate, tired, exhausted, a world. That's where our world, right? And it's heartbreaking. I don't know how you can even, I guess you just keep going, right? You just do the best you can. And hey, I get it. For me, things are better than for most, but you got to see the handwriting on the wall. If we can't somehow, some way, together unite against the corporate duopoly, against the people who are for war in Ukraine, who are for war, endless war in Ukraine, endless war in the Middle East, who are against any kind of tax increases on the wealthy, who are for raising needed funds by exploiting people who have a mental health illness, gamaholism. If we can't say no to those people, we can't stand up to them, this is our future. So outside that glitzy hotel, desperate people with gray faces, decaying teeth, right? We don't have healthcare in this country. Minds poisoned by worry and fear and hatred. Think of it. People who are, they're so afraid of Donald Trump, they embrace Joe Biden. Or so hate Joe Biden so much, they embrace Donald Trump, rather than saying, no, we have to say no to both. Outside of this island of purposeful lies, which I read today, Washington, D.C., and pretensions, there was nude, sheer misery everywhere. All over the country, all over Europe, there were empty market stalls and a broken down transportation system. Think about Baltimore. A helpless bureaucracy that had grown like a malignant tumor and was feeding on its own rotten cells. Prisons crowded with tortured ghosts. Hospitals and hospital trains filled with the groans of the wounded and the signs of those who died. Burning towns and destroyed provinces. And this is not an exaggeration. This is America today and the world today. Bursting dams, exploding factories. Homeless population shifted without mercy. And slave workers breaking down under stress and shock. Confusion, panic, terror. And the taste of doom everywhere. In the hotel, they ate their last reserves of pate and rinsed it down with champagne. So I think we have to ask ourselves, do we have the intelligence or the moral fiber to say this has got to end? We've got to stop what we're doing now. It's not just that it's not working. We're destroying ourselves. We're feeding, we're cannibalizing ourselves. We're feeding on our own carrion. That is where we are. And unless we can somehow muster the ability, the strength, the purpose to break free of this duopoly, this paradigm that we have now, the future is as ugly as it has ever been. All right, you guys have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow.